Have you ever heard of the crystal skulls? These life-sized human skulls, carved from single blocks of clear or milky quartz, are some of the most mystifying objects in the world. For decades, they've been at the center of a swirling vortex of myth, legend, and intense scientific debate. The story often begins with a young woman named Anna Mitchell-Hedges, who claimed to have discovered the most famous skull of all in 1924, deep within the ruins of a Mayan temple in Belize. This skull, known as the Skull of Doom or the Mitchell-Hedges Skull, was said to be a relic of immense power, capable of influencing the future and even causing death to those who mocked it. Legends grew, claiming it was one of 13 ancient skulls scattered across the globe. The story goes that when all 13 are brought together, they will unlock humanity's deepest secrets and usher in a new era of consciousness. It's a tale straight out of an adventure movie, and for a long time, many believed it to be true. The allure is undeniable. Imagine holding an object so perfectly crafted, so eerily lifelike, and being told it was painstakingly carved by ancient civilizations like the Maya or the Aztecs, without the use of modern tools. Believers propose that these skulls were repositories of ancient knowledge, crystal computers left behind by a lost civilization, or perhaps even gifts from extraterrestrial visitors. The skulls weren't just artifacts. They were keys to a forgotten past and a prophesied future. But as the legend grew, so did the skepticism. Scientists and archaeologists began to ask tough questions. How could ancient cultures, with only rudimentary tools, create such flawless objects from one of the hardest minerals on Earth? If these were sacred Mayan or Aztec artifacts, why were there no mentions of them in any historical records or indigenous codices? The mystery deepened, and the quest for truth led the skulls from dusty antique shops and private collections into the sterile, high-tech environment of the modern laboratory. The first major scientific investigation took place in the 1970s at the Hewlett-Packard Laboratories, a pioneer in quartz crystal technology. They examined the Mitchell-Hedges skull and were initially baffled. They couldn't find any telltale microscopic scratch marks that would indicate it was carved with metal tools. This finding was sensationalized, feeding the narrative that the skulls must have been made with some unknown, advanced technology. The conclusion at the time was that it would have taken generations, perhaps 300 years of continuous hand polishing to create such a piece. However, science and technology march on. Decades later, researchers at the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution took another look, this time with even more advanced tools. Using powerful scanning electron microscopes, they re-examined the British Museum skull and the Smithsonian's own crystal skull, which had been anonymously mailed to them in 1992. What they found turned the legend on its head. Under extreme magnification, they discovered something the earlier tests had missed: microscopic marks that were not random. They were the distinct, parallel tracks left behind by a high-speed rotary carving tool coated with a modern abrasive, like diamond or carborundum. These were tools that simply did not exist in pre-Columbian America. Carborundum, for example, is a synthetic substance that was only invented in the late 19th century. The game was up. The chemical and geological analysis of the quartz itself also provided clues, tracing the material not to Central America, but to sources in Brazil or Madagascar, which were not major trade routes for the Aztecs or Maya. So, if they weren't ancient, where did they come from? The trail led back to 19th century Europe, a time when fascination with ancient cultures was at an all-time high. Museums and wealthy collectors were hungry for exotic artifacts from distant lands. This created a booming market for antiquities, both real and fake. It's now widely believed that the skulls were crafted in Germany, probably in the late 1800s, by exceptionally skilled lapidaries catering to this demand. They were then sold through intermediaries, like the French antiques dealer Eugene Bobin, who specialized in pre-Columbian artifacts and had a history of dealing with questionable items. He sold several crystal skulls to museums and collectors, likely presenting them as genuine ancient relics. The story of Anna Mitchell-Hedges, the adventurous discoverer, also began to unravel. There is no evidence she was even in Belize at the time she claimed to have found the skull. Records show that her father, Frederick Mitchell-Hedges, actually bought the skull at a Sotheby's auction in London in 1943. It seems the dramatic discovery story was a fabrication, a piece of family folklore created to add a sense of romance and mystery to their prized possession. So the scientific verdict is clear. The famous crystal skulls are not ancient Mayan or Aztec artifacts, but brilliant modern forgeries. But this is where the story gets even more interesting. Why, in the face of overwhelming scientific evidence, do so many people still believe in their mystical powers? This question takes us out of the laboratory and into the fascinating realm of human psychology. Our brains are wired to find patterns and meaning, even where none exist. This is a phenomenon known as apophenia. The skulls are a perfect canvas for this. They look ancient, they feel mysterious, and the stories surrounding them are incredibly compelling. We want to believe in magic, in lost worlds, and in hidden knowledge. The skulls tap directly into our desire for a world that is more enchanted than the one we see every day. This is reinforced by confirmation bias, our tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs. If you believe the skulls are powerful, you'll interpret any strange coincidence or feeling you have in their presence as proof. A flickering light becomes a sign of its energy. A lucky break becomes the skull's doing. The evidence against them is dismissed as a conspiracy by mainstream science to hide the truth. The crystal skulls are a modern myth, but that doesn't make them any less powerful. They are a testament not to ancient technology, but to human artistry, ingenuity, and our eternal capacity for belief. They show us that sometimes the story is more important than the object itself. They are beautiful, they are mysterious, and they challenge our understanding of the line between fact and fiction, history and legend. The mystery of the crystal skulls may have been solved by science, but the magic they hold in our collective imagination endures. 13 skulls, scattered across the world, hidden for centuries, waiting. According to modern legend, when the 13 crystal skulls are reunited, they will reveal humanity's destiny. Some say they contain ancient knowledge. Others claim they are Atlantean memory devices. Some believe they are extraterrestrial technology. But here's the question. Did this prophecy ever exist in ancient history, or was it born in the modern imagination? Tonight, we follow the myth, from jungle ruins to New Age conventions. Despite widespread claims, there is no Maya inscription mentioning 13 crystal skulls, no codex describing crystal skull prophecy, no archaeological record supporting their ceremonial use. The ancient Maya civilization did revere skull imagery, but in stone carvings and ritual symbolism, not carved quartz skull replicas. The 13 Skulls prophecy appears to emerge in the 20th century, particularly in spiritualist literature of the 1970s-1990s. Writers claimed the skulls were ancient computers. They store sacred cosmic information. They will activate during a planetary alignment, but no primary historical source confirms these claims. This is our first critical insight. The prophecy is modern, yet belief spread rapidly. Why? The rise of the crystal skull legend coincided with the expansion of New Age spirituality. This movement blended indigenous symbolism, mysticism, alternative healing, ancient astronaut theories, quartz, in particular, became associated with energy amplification. Because crystal can store electrical charge, piezoelectricity, it was reimagined spiritually as a memory holder. Some believers argued the skulls are Atlantean artifacts, Lemurian relics, extraterrestrial gifts. The skull form itself added power. Across cultures, the human skull symbolizes mortality, consciousness, spirit, ancestral wisdom. Combine quartz plus skull plus lost civilization, and you create mythic gravity. By the late 20th century, crystal skull conferences were being organized. Individuals claimed to own authentic ancient skulls. Gatherings were held to unite them energetically. Books were written, documentaries were produced. Then came Hollywood. In 2008, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull brought the concept to global audiences. In the film, the skull is extraterrestrial in origin and linked to interdimensional beings. The movie blurred archaeology and science fiction. For millions of viewers, fiction reinforced possibility. Pop culture doesn't create belief, but it amplifies it. Why 13? In Mesoamerican cosmology, the number 13 is significant. The Maya calendar includes 13 numbers in its sacred Zocan cycle. There are 13 heavens in certain interpretations of Maya cosmology. This numerical symbolism gave the legend a veneer of authenticity, but symbolism is not evidence. The modern myth cleverly borrowed real cultural elements, then wove them into a new narrative. This blending of truth and fiction is powerful, because it feels plausible. Many people who encounter crystal skulls report feeling vibrations, experiencing visions, emotional reactions, sensations of warmth or energy. From a psychological perspective, Expectation shapes perception. If someone believes an object contains energy, their brain may generate a genuine physiological response. This does not mean they are lying. It means belief is powerful. The skull becomes a focal point for projection, a mirror reflecting internal experience. Despite widespread myth, archaeology remains quiet. Major institutions such as the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution have tested crystal skulls in their collections. Results indicate modern tool marks, 19th century lapidary techniques. No verifiable pre-Columbian context. If 13 ancient skulls existed, where are the excavation records? Where are the inscriptions? Where are the temple depictions? They do not exist. The prophecy thrives in narrative space, not archaeological evidence. The prophecy of the 13 skulls survives for one reason. It offers hope. Hope that ancient wisdom still waits. Hope that humanity has forgotten something profound. Hope that revelation is coming. Myths endure when they satisfy emotional needs. The crystal skull legend speaks to fear of global crisis, desire for spiritual awakening, fascination with lost civilizations. Even if the skulls are modern, the longing behind the myth is ancient, and that longing is real. If the prophecy is modern, then what about the objects themselves? Were they deliberate frauds, artistic creations, or misunderstood artifacts? For decades, the crystal skulls lived in the realm of legend, whispers of lost civilizations, prophecies of 13 sacred relics, claims of supernatural energy. But eventually, belief met a microscope. And when science stepped into the mystery, the questions became sharper than ever. Were these skulls ancient masterpieces of the Maya civilization, or modern creations born from 19th century fascination? Tonight, we follow the evidence, not the myth. By the mid-20th century, several crystal skulls had entered museum collections. They were labeled pre-Columbian, displayed as relics of ancient Mesoamerica. But some archaeologists noticed inconsistencies: no documented excavation sites, no clear historical references, no depictions in Maya carvings or codices, no mention in Spanish colonial records. The absence of context was troubling. Authentic ancient artifacts typically come from controlled digs. They are found alongside pottery, tools, architecture. But the skulls seem to appear fully formed, without archaeological roots. This raised the first serious doubts. One of the most famous crystal skulls entered the collection of the British Museum in the late 1800s. For years, it was believed to be Aztec or Maya, but in the 1990s, advanced testing began. Using scanning electron microscopy, researchers examined the skull's surface. What they found was decisive: parallel striations, microscopic tool marks consistent with high-speed rotary wheels. These marks are not produced by ancient stone tools. They are characteristic of modern lapidary equipment. In other words, the carving techniques matched 19th century European workshops, not pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. Similar investigations were conducted at the Smithsonian Institution. Their crystal skulls showed comparable tool signatures. The findings included diamond-coated rotary tool marks, uniform polishing patterns, surface features inconsistent with hand abrasion. Additionally, chemical analysis showed no residue, indicating long burial in tropical soil. If the skull had been buried for centuries in Central America, microscopic soil traces would likely remain, but they were absent. The scientific conclusion became increasingly clear. The skulls were likely carved in the 1800s. Quartz is extremely hard, ranking 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Carving it requires harder abrasives, sustained grinding, precision shaping tools. Ancient Mesoamerican craftsmen were extraordinarily skilled. They carved jade and obsidian with stone tools and sand abrasion. But clear quartz carving of this symmetry, especially with detachable jaws like the Mitchell-Hedges Crystal Skull, would require remarkable time and technique. More importantly, the microscopic marks do not match ancient abrasion methods. They match modern machinery. That distinction matters, because tool marks are like fingerprints. They tell the story of manufacture. Scientific evidence was only part of the puzzle. Historical documentation added another layer. Crystal skulls began appearing in Europe in the mid to late 19th century. Several were linked to the French antiquities dealer Eugene Bobin. Bobin sold Mesoamerican artifacts to collectors and museums. Records show crystal skulls passing through his hands. The timeline suggests skulls surfaced during a period of high European demand, They lack pre-1800 documentation. They are associated with antiquities markets. This pattern aligns more with commercial production than ancient ritual use. The skulls appear precisely when the market wanted them. Scientific findings did not end the debate. Believers offered alternative explanations. Ancient advanced technology, lost. Atlantean engineering, extraterrestrial influence. Unknown ancient polishing methods, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so far, no evidence supports advanced ancient quartz machining. Instead, evidence consistently points toward 19th century craftsmanship. This creates tension between data and desire, because the idea of an ancient crystal skull is compelling. It feels epic, it feels mythic. But science asks, what does the evidence actually show? Under magnification, mystery becomes texture. Tool marks become testimony, striations become witnesses. Science did not mock the legend, it examined it. And in doing so, it shifted the narrative from ancient ritual to modern creation. But here's the surprising truth. Even if carved in 19th century Europe, the skulls remain powerful cultural artifacts. Not of the Maya, but of modern myth-making. They reveal how stories are born, how belief spreads, how objects become icons. They are objects of legend said to possess otherworldly powers and ancient secrets. Carved from pure quartz crystal, these human-like skulls have captivated imaginations for over a century. Are they relics of lost civilizations like the Maya or Aztecs, imbued with mystical energy? Or is there a more down-to-earth explanation? Today, we're peeling back the layers of myth to uncover the truth behind the crystal skulls. This is a story of mystery, ambition, and a fascinating deception that fooled the world. The legend of the crystal skulls often begins with a tale of 13 ancient skulls scattered across the globe. The story goes that when these 13 skulls are brought together, they will unlock a profound secret about humanity's past and future. It's a narrative straight out of an adventure movie, and for a long time it was accepted by many as historical fact. Believers claim the skulls were carved by pre-Columbian civilizations with a technology far beyond their time, perhaps even with alien assistance. They were said to heal the sick, grant visions, and serve as cosmic libraries of ancient knowledge. The most famous of these is the Mitchell-Hedges skull, supposedly discovered in a Mayan temple in Belize in the 1920s by a young Anna Mitchell-Hedges. Its story is filled with drama and intrigue, contributing heavily to the powerful mystique surrounding these objects. But as we'll see, the line between myth and reality can be incredibly thin. The first crystal skulls to appear on the world stage didn't emerge from ancient tombs, but from the bustling antique markets of 19th century Paris. A key figure in this story is a man named Eugene Bobin, a French antiquarian who had spent considerable time in Mexico. In the 1860s and 70s, Bobin began to offer small crystal skulls to collectors and museums, presenting them as genuine pre-Columbian artifacts. One of his skulls was sold to the British Museum in London, and another found its way to the Musée du Quai Branly in Paris. At the time, Europe was gripped by a fascination with ancient American cultures. Museums were eager to acquire exotic artifacts, and Bobin, with his connections and seemingly expert knowledge, was the perfect person to supply them. These early skulls were relatively small and crudely carved compared to the later, more famous examples. They were presented as Aztec votive objects, representing Mictlantecutli, the Aztec god of the dead. For decades, they were displayed as authentic pieces of a lost world, their origins rarely questioned. But Eugene Bobin was a complex character, part explorer, part showman, and perhaps part conman. His role is central to understanding how this entire myth began. The story really takes off with the appearance of the most iconic skull of all, the Mitchell-Hedges skull. Its tale is far more elaborate and cinematic than that of the earlier museum pieces. According to the legend promoted by Frederick Mitchell-Hedges and his adopted daughter Anna, she discovered the skull under a collapsed altar in the ancient Mayan city of Lubantun in British Honduras, now Belize, on her 17th birthday in 1924. Frederick, a British adventurer and writer, described it as the Skull of Doom, claiming it was used by Mayan high priests to will death. He spun a narrative of immense antiquity, suggesting it was at least 3,600 years old. The skull itself is a marvel. Carved from a single block of clear quartz, it's anatomically detailed, with a separate detachable jaw. It's this lifelike quality that made it so convincing and so famous. For decades, Anna Mitchell-Hedges toured with the skull, telling its dramatic discovery story to captivated audiences, perpetuating its reputation as a powerful and ancient artifact. The skull became a New Age icon, a symbol of ancient wisdom and unexplained phenomena. But as compelling as the story was, it began to crumble under scrutiny. The first major cracks in the legend appeared when scientific investigation was finally brought to bear on these enigmatic objects. In the 1990s and early 2000s, researchers at the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution decided to take a closer look at their own crystal skulls, as well as the famous Mitchell-Hedges skull. Using powerful tools like scanning electron microscopes, they examined the surfaces of the skulls for tool marks. What they found was a game-changer. Ancient Mesoamerican cultures like the Aztecs and Maya used simple hand-powered tools made of stone, wood, and bone. These would have left very specific, irregular scratches and patterns on the crystal. Instead, the scientists found something entirely different. The surfaces of the skulls were covered in perfectly straight, parallel lines and smooth, uniform curves. These marks were the unmistakable signature of modern, high-speed, rotary cutting and polishing tools, lapidary wheels powered by electricity. These were tools that simply did not exist in the ancient Americas. They were, however, widely available in 19th century Germany, a world center for gemstone carving. The evidence was damning. The skulls weren't ancient relics. They were modern creations. With the scientific evidence pointing towards a 19th century origin, investigators turned their attention back to the man who started it all, Eugene Boban. A deep dive into historical archives and Boban's own records revealed a fascinating network. It seems highly likely that Boban wasn't just a seller of artifacts but a commissioner of them. He had strong connections to workshops in Germany, the same workshops that possessed the technology to create these intricate carvings. The theory is that Boban commissioned the skulls from German artisans, who were renowned for their skill in working with quartz. He then brought them back to Paris and Mexico, passing them off as priceless pre-Columbian treasures to an eager market. He was essentially creating the antiques he was selling. As for the larger, more sophisticated skulls like the Mitchell-Hedges piece, they likely followed the same pattern created later in the 19th or even early 20th century to capitalize on the growing myth that Boban himself had helped to start. The trail of evidence leads not to a jungle temple, but to a European workshop. So what about the most famous story of all, Anna Mitchell-Hedges, discovering her skull in a Mayan ruin? Well, that story has problems too. For one, there is no mention of the skull's discovery in any of the official excavation reports from Lubonton. Frederick Mitchell-Hedges himself didn't mention it in his early articles about the expedition. The tale only emerged years later, growing more elaborate with each telling. Furthermore, investigative work has traced the skull's likely provenance back to a London auction house, Sotheby's, where it was sold in 1943 to Frederick Mitchell-Hedges himself. It seems the dramatic discovery story was a complete fabrication, a piece of theater designed to give the object an unbeatable pedigree and increase its fame and value. Anna likely went along with her father's story her entire life, perhaps because it had become her own identity. It was a story far more romantic and exciting than purchasing an object at auction. The tale of the Skull of Doom wasn't an ancient Mayan legend, but a modern myth created by a 20th century adventurer. So, if the crystal skulls are not ancient artifacts, why do we remain so fascinated by them? The answer lies in our deep-seated love for a good mystery and our desire to believe in something beyond the ordinary. The skulls tap into our fascination with lost civilizations, ancient wisdom, and the possibility of forgotten technologies or even alien contact. They are perfect symbols for these ideas. They look ancient, they feel mysterious, and the stories surrounding them are incredibly compelling. The New Age movement of the 20th century adopted the skulls as powerful spiritual tools, further cementing their place in popular culture. Even after the scientific evidence debunked their ancient origins, the myth proved too powerful to die. People wanted to believe. And in a way, the true story is just as fascinating. It's a tale of ambition, craftsmanship, and a brilliant deception that spanned continents and lasted for more than 100 years. It speaks volumes about our own psychology and our willingness to embrace a good story over hard facts. The story of the crystal skulls serves as a powerful lesson in critical thinking. It shows how easily a compelling narrative, repeated often enough, can become accepted as truth, even in the absence of real evidence. Museums, collectors, and the general public were all taken in by the allure of these objects. It took the rigorous application of the scientific method, microscopic analysis, and historical research to finally separate fact from fiction. It reminds us to always question the source, to look for evidence, and to be wary of stories that seem too good or too mysterious to be true. The crystal skulls are not windows into an ancient past, but they are mirrors, reflecting our own hopes, fears, and our enduring capacity for belief. They are no longer artifacts of the Maya or Aztecs, but they have become artifacts of our modern mythology. In the end, the crystal skulls are not magical relics from a lost world. They are masterful pieces of 19th century craftsmanship, born from a European fascination with ancient cultures and brought to fame by ambitious showmen and storytellers. Their legend is a modern one, a testament to the power of a good story to capture the human imagination. While they may not hold the secrets of the universe, they tell us a great deal about ourselves and our unending quest for wonder. The mystery of who precisely carved them and why may never be fully solved, but their place as icons of pseudo-archaeology is secure. They are beautiful objects, and their story, both the myth and the reality, is an incredible one. Our story begins in the late 19th century, a time when European interest in ancient civilizations was at its peak. This was the era of explorers and antiquarians, and the art market was flooded with artifacts, both real and fake. It was into this world that the first crystal skulls emerged, most notably through a Parisian dealer named Eugene Bobin. He claimed they were Aztec relics, and museums and wealthy collectors alike were fascinated. They were just so perfect. Smooth, impossibly detailed, and eerily lifelike. The craftsmanship seemed far beyond what ancient tools could achieve. The most famous of all is the Mitchell-Hedges Skull, sometimes called the Skull of Doom. Its story is pure adventure novel material. Anna Mitchell-Hedges, the adopted daughter of a British adventurer, claimed she discovered it in 1924, buried under a collapsed altar in a Mayan ruin in Belize. She described it as a perfectly carved, life-size skull made from a single block of clear quartz crystal with a separate articulated jaw. It was said to be at least 3,600 years old. For decades, the Mitchell-Hedges skull was presented as proof of an advanced, lost civilization. People who saw it reported strange experiences. They claimed the skull could emit light, project images, and even cause misfortunes for those who mocked it. Believers in the New Age movement adopted it as a sacred object, a sort of cosmic computer storing holographic information from ancient cultures, perhaps even from extraterrestrials. The legend grew, fueled by books, documentaries, and of course that famous Indiana Jones movie. The idea was intoxicating. What if our ancestors possessed a technology we couldn't even comprehend? But as technology advanced, so did our ability to scrutinize these claims. Scientists were finally able to get their hands on some of these skulls, including the one at the British Museum and another at the Smithsonian, both of which had passed through Eugene Bobin's collection. What they found was a game-changer. Using powerful electron microscopes, they examined the surfaces of the skulls. What did they see? Not the uneven, irregular marks of hand-carving tools you'd expect from ancient artisans. Instead, they found perfectly straight, parallel lines. These were the unmistakable telltale signs of modern, high-speed, rotary carving tools, likely coated with diamond or another hard abrasive. Tools that simply did not exist in pre-Columbian America. Further analysis of the quartz itself threw up more red flags. Geologists were able to trace the source of the crystal. The quartz used for the British Museum and Smithsonian skulls didn't come from Mexico or Central America. It came from Brazil and Madagascar. While trade networks did exist, this finding, combined with the tool marks, made an ancient origin extremely unlikely. The scientific consensus became clear. These skulls were not ancient Aztec or Mayan artifacts. They were most likely manufactured in Germany in the 19th century, a region famous for its expert crystal carving, and then sold to collectors hungry for exotic treasures from the New World. So, what about the most famous one, the Mitchell-Hedges skull? For a long time, its owners refused to allow it to be scientifically tested. But eventually, in 2007, it too was examined by experts. The results? Exactly the same. Microscopic analysis revealed marks from modern rotary tools. The story Anna Mitchell-Hedges told about finding it in a Mayan ruin fell apart. In fact, records showed her father had purchased the skull at a Sotheby's auction in London in 1943. It seems the entire discovery story was a fabrication, a tale spun to create a myth and add value to their prized possession. So the crystal skulls are fakes. Case closed, right? Well, not quite. This is where the story gets really interesting. Because even with overwhelming scientific evidence, the legend persists. Why? Why are we so drawn to this idea? I think it's because the skulls represent something we all find fascinating, the mystery of the past. They tap into our desire to believe that ancient civilizations were more advanced and more magical than we give them credit for. It's the same impulse that drives our fascination with Atlantis or the pyramids. We want to believe in lost worlds and forgotten wisdom. The skulls are also a perfect example of what we call a stone tape theory or psychometry, the idea that objects can absorb and record the energy, thoughts, and emotions of events around them. Believers feel that the quartz crystal acts like a hard drive, and that psychics or sensitive individuals can read this stored information. Modern science doesn't support this, but it's a powerful and romantic notion. It suggests that history isn't just written in books, but is embedded in the very fabric of the world around us. And let's be honest, the story is just too good to let go of completely. A mysterious adventurer, a hidden temple, a perfect crystal skull with supernatural powers, it's pure Hollywood. The fact that it was likely a clever 19th century hoax almost makes the story better. It becomes a tale not just about ancient Mayans, but about modern deception, ambition, and our own willingness to believe. The creator of the skulls, whoever they were, wasn't just a skilled artisan. They were a master storyteller who crafted an object so enigmatic that it created its own legend. Today, the crystal skulls occupy a strange space between archaeology and pop culture. They are museum artifacts, but also new age icons. They are scientific subjects, but also the stars of blockbuster movies. They are a reminder that sometimes the stories we tell about objects can become more powerful and more important than the objects themselves. They show us that a good mystery doesn't always need to be solved to be enjoyed. The legend of the crystal skulls may be built on a lie, but it speaks to a truth about human nature, our unending quest for wonder, magic, and a connection to the mysteries of the past. What do you think? Are the skulls just clever fakes, or is there still some mystery left to uncover? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the world of historical mysteries, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks for watching.